Welcome to New York's #2 sports show. The Rangers defeat the Toronto Maple Leafs by a final score of 6-2 in what was their first home regulation win since November 24th. So they had went 18 straight games without a regulation home win, and in game 19, they finally break the streak. Rangers now 2-0-2 since the Olympic break, which has kind of given them a little bit of resurgence. More than anything, it's that Igor Shesterkin and Adam Fox returned to the lineup, which is just immeasurably important for this team. And they've lost some people on the way. I mean, one of the big storylines out of tonight is the fact that Vincent Trocheck and Sam Carrick were held out of the lineup. Presumably, they will be dealt by the trade deadline, which we will discuss once we find out more as far as that goes. Um, you know, but a Ranger lineup that you look at the forwards, it's really not very good, but they've been getting some solid goaltending. Granted, last game wasn't really a good one for Igor, and even one of the goals in this game, the second goal by the Leafs, was one that Shesterkin would like to have back. But the defense currently, it's not amazing, but it's competent. And as bad as the Rangers are at home, I really, and this isn't a bold statement, but they're going to find a way to grab some points at home more so than on the road. I think that's going to be the case the rest of the way. There's a lot more games in Madison Square Garden. And that's even with the last, if you want to go back even to before the break, the last 5 games have been at home. And just the schedule the rest of the way isn't overly difficult with about 21 or so games to go. Rangers record now sits at 24, 29, and 8. And it's just a little bit frustrating. Again, it's not the players' fault. They got to go out there and try to do the best they can. But the timing is so important. And this Leaf team, they lost their 6th in a row, all out of the Olympic break. They're in a somewhat similar situation to the Rangers. Now, the only difference is they're not trading core players from their team, right? The Matthews, Nylanders, Tavares, Nyes, Rileys. They're all, around, but on the outskirts and a little bit closer to that, there was a lot of healthy scratch players that would be regulars in their lineup. They even made a trade. They traded Nick Waugh to Colorado. So they're in sell mode. And so this was a game where Toronto, quite honestly, was the better team through 2 periods. They were. Leafs had a lot of good opportunities at the end of the second. There was a shift there where Robertson and Iorio were stuck with, I believe it was some combination of the bottom 6 that was on there. It might have been Hamelash, Laba, and Cartier, something like that. And they weren't able to score, and the Rangers scored 4 goals in the third period. Now, one of them was an empty net goal, but still, that's 2 straight games where they have scored 4 goals for a team that really can't score at all. Another thing, JT Miller. We had spoke about, I don't know in how much detail, but last episode, how on the goal scored by Will Borgen to make it 4-3, how JT Miller drew a penalty, and while he was down, he took a heavy slap shot from Will Borgen. And it's speculation, but I think it's kind of based upon the replays and, he hit his head hard on the ice just in general. And then he took that puck to the neck area. And so he was placed on IR with an upper body injury. We can assume that it might be a concussion. And so who knows how long he'll be out. Really, there should be no rush to bring him back. And look, JT Miller being out of the lineup in some ways, it's addition by subtraction. But, I'm not going to go too deep into that because, look, obviously, you look at the rest of the forward lines, it's pretty rough. So even a JT Miller in theory is better than that. But what we do know now is that Vincent Trocheck and Sam Carrick are very likely to be dealt, right? That would, and I was kind of waiting for an indication, and things have been kind of quiet. We knew the Trocheck rumors, but you weren't totally sure. And to be honest, it's kind of smart from Chris Drury's perspective to, this is different than Panarin, who was an unrestricted free agent. You don't want to make it overly obvious, but at the same time, they must feel confident far enough in discussions that they didn't want to risk the injury. And so with both Trocheck and Carrick, they're out. Now, that doesn't mean there won't be other deals. There could, for players that were in the lineup. in this game. And just even like a Brennan Osmond, for example, who's in Hartford currently, I would believe that he is dealt by the deadline as well. So at a bare minimum, it's Trocheck and Carrick and maybe some more as well. The more time that goes on, it feels like a Braden Schneider trade is less and less likely. Maybe that's something that's more in the offseason. It's not something that they have to do, but it just, I don't know. And maybe part of this because he was in the lineup, but I don't know. I don't get the sense that that's on the table, but you may get some minor deals if they can get anything for guys like Taylor Radish, um, or Johnny Brodzinski or Connor Sherry, which isn't much. It's probably nothing, to be honest with you, especially for the latter two. But we'll see, what happens. But there will be some deals made by the New York Rangers, and that's kind of what I'm most interested in. Is we are closing in on the trade deadline, but in this game, they beat the Toronto Maple Leafs, and Jarolsav Chmelar actually scores his first NHL goal. He's been up and down a lot this season. 2021 draft pick, um, really, which is much maligned. That's the one that actually has Brennan Othman as the number one selection of that draft by the Rangers, and Chmelar was a fifth round pick. But in his seventh game with the Rangers, he does score a goal. And let's discuss some of the lines again. No, Jay, think about last game to this game. It even goes beyond what I already discussed, where the Rangers made some transactions as far as Hartford and the NHL club. They sent down Brendan Brisson and Scott Morrow. Scott Morrow had been a healthy scratch, so nothing changes there. Vakanainen stays as the defensive healthy scratch, and it continues to be Gavrikov with Fox, Schneider on the left with Borgen, and Robertson with Iorio. So Iorio is getting a pretty good look here after he was a waiver claim from the San Jose Sharks. And for the forwards, they called up Juuso Parssinen, who was waived early in the season. We had not seen him for a while. He was given a 2-year extension in the offseason. So anything was on the table there. I mean, it could have been a minor trade involving Parson. It could still happen. But now with the Rangers kind of a little more thin on centers, think about it. Trocheck on the way out, Carrick on the way out. Even though Miller was playing wing, he plays center as well. So Parson specifically does make sense down the middle. And as well, Chmelar was called up. So Johnny Brodzinski comes in the lineup. He had been a healthy scratch in each of the games coming out of the break. And so the technical healthy scratches were because Miller was placed on IR. Adam Edstrom was activated from the injured list. So he made his return. So a bit of a different looking lineup. And so technically the healthy scratches were Trocheck, Carrick, and Vakanainen. Again, Shesterkin, of course, in that again. And for the Leafs, they were on the second of a back-to-back. They had lost in a shootout against the Devils, where they were pretty thoroughly outplayed, although they had a somewhat late lead. Devils tied it up, and then the Devils won it in the shootout. The Rangers in this game would go up against Joseph Woll. It's a combination, not a great one, goaltending-wise at least, of Woll and Stolarz. Woll has probably been the better goaltender this season than Stolarz. The previous matchup between the Rangers was actually one that I was at in Toronto on October 6th when the Leafs won against the Rangers 2-1 in overtime. And things have changed a lot since then for two of these original 6 clubs. But immediately after the Rangers honored some of the more recent fan favorites from the last 20 years, they, in the last centennial event that they have, so the Rangers were in their centennial jerseys. And by the way, it's crazy with all of the alternates. And now we actually have news as I'm recording. Elliot Friedman is reporting that the Rangers will trade Sam Carrick to Buffalo. So I will, as I'm recording this, I'll look to see what the compensation is. And I will be doing an episode on that shortly. So 13 seconds into this game, Matias Maccelli scores his 12th goal of the season, assisted by William Nylander. So this was a face-off win by Toronto. It's dumped in, and Gavrikov loses the puck to Nylander. He goes around the net and finds a wide open Michelli. Zibanejad probably wasn't in the best spot, and it kind of took Fox out of the play. So not a good start for a line that was Zibanejad centering Perreault and Lafrenière. The second line, which is crazy to say, although they actually weren't all that terrible, was Johnny Brodzinski centering Cooley and Radish. Um, the third line was Laba centering Cartier and Sherry, and the fourth line was Parsonen with Edstrom and Hamelash, which is obviously a very new line that is really mostly Hartford type players combined with Edstrom, who had been out due to injury. So 1-0 Leafs, and then the Rangers are able to tie it up, just as they've done a lot lately. The Rangers haven't led a whole lot. Now, they did in the third period, but the Rangers, time and time again, have tied these games up. And it's Will Cooley scoring his 14th goal of the season, assisted by Braden Schneider at 6:45. Now, this was after, I should mention, the Leafs killed off a Ranger power play. Michelli takes an unnecessary slashing penalty. He slashes Borgen at 38 seconds. Leafs kill it off. But, that may have turned momentum pretty quickly. And Cooley gets the goal off of the point shot by Schneider. So Cooley was kind of left alone in front, and it ties the game up at 1. The first period, I would say the Leafs were the better team. They outshot the Rangers 10-4. Shesterkin made some pretty good saves. We go to the Leafs do get their one power play on a Parsonen hooking penalty of Max Domi, but the Rangers kill that off. We go to the second period, and yet again, the Leafs score to retake the lead. Easton Cowan scores his 8th goal of the season from Matthew Nyes and John Tavares at 5:27. And just not a great goal allowed by Igor Shesterkin. It's one where Cowan has a little bit of room entering the zone, but I think it's one that Shesterkin liked to have back. Makes it 2-1 Leafs, but a penalty taken right away. Iorio actually draws it. He was on a mini breakaway, and Morgan Riley takes him down. He hooks him at 6:06. And it's the second unit that scores. Vlad Gavrikov is 11th goal, which is pretty ridiculous. Even with all of the ice time he's getting, 11 goals for him at this point is not something that anyone could have seen. Assisted by Radish and Brodzinski, and this was one off of a neutral zone faceoff win by the Rangers. Brodzinski is able to dump it off to Radish. Radish with the quick shot, a juicy rebound allowed by Joseph Wall, and Gavrikov is able to bang it home to tie it at 2. And this was where, the Leafs towards the end of the period were really, really, dominating as far as possession time, but were unable to score past Shesterkin. And so it is 2-2 going to the third period. And the Rangers fairly quickly, and this was off of a couple of icings by the Leafs. The Leafs players were hemmed in. And it really started, I think the lava line with Sherry and Cartier were the ones that were making it happen. But then smartly, Sullivan puts on the Zibanejad line, and Lafrenière ends up being the game-winning goal. He scores to give the Rangers a 3-2 lead at 5:38, and kind of similar to the Cooley goal. Zibanejad takes the shot from up top, and Lafrenière with the stick is able to tip it in to make it 3-2. Then at 10:27, Jarolsav Chmelar scores his first NHL goal unassisted. He goes in on a breakaway. And, just a bad turnover by the Leafs. Give Chmelar credit, uses some speed, and scores. So a good moment for him. He makes it 4-2, and then the floodgates really open up because less than a minute later, Zibanejad scores his 25th goal of the season from Lafrenière and Fox. So at 11:19, Rangers take a 5-2 lead. And then for good measure, the Leafs did pull the goal lead down by 3. Will Cooley scores his 2nd goal of the game, 15th goal of the season from Lafrenière and Zibanejad. So it's a 3-point night for Alexis Lafrenière and Mika Zibanejad, a goal and 2 assists each. Igor Shesterkin gets 29 saves on 31 shots. And so the final score is a 6-2 Rangers win. They have gotten 6 of a possible 8 points out of the Olympic break, 2-0-2 to be exact. All games at Madison Square Garden. Their first game, not an MSG, will be their next game, and it's a close one. It's at New Jersey against the Devils in a weird scheduling quirk. The first game against the Devils on March 7th. 3 games for teams that don't have playoff aspirations this year. So kind of again a weird thing there where they were done with the Islanders in 4 games, by basically the end of January. And on the flip side, they don't play the Devils until March. But anyway, um, a lot going on right now with the trade deadline. Going to discuss again the Sam Carrick deal to Buffalo in a separate episode, and then of course, we're going to discuss what likely is a Vincent Trocheck trade as well. So keep an eye out for that, as well as all the Ranger deadline coverage. And I hope the Rangers can, stop the winning, stop the points. I mean, you would think with making some of these trades that they would lose more games, but look, getting Shesterkin and Fox back, coming back from the break has brought a little bit of light and life into this team. But I'm hoping it doesn't last too long, because they are jockeying for position with teams like the Flames, the Blues, the Blackhawks, and things are close with 20 plus games to go. So first Ranger win in regulation at home since November 24th. Crazy. They finally, on try 19, they finally got it. Their first win at home regulation versus an Eastern Conference team. Ridiculous. They still haven't beaten the team in the division in regulation at home. But look, another third period where they score 4 goals. They did it against Columbus. They lost in overtime when they were down 4-0. And then in this one, tied 2-2 going to the third, 4 goals, one being an empty net goal. But look, good for Chmelar getting his first NHL goal. Lafrenière and Zibanejad 3 points each. Will Cooley 2 goals. Again, Igor, like I said, with those 29 saves on 31 shots. So look, next game versus New Jersey. We'll see what comes out on a Saturday afternoon game. But right now, all the thoughts and talk is around what the Rangers will do trade deadline wise. We will certainly be discussing that, as I'm actually likely to be recording an episode very shortly on Sam Carrick being dealt to the Sabres. Again, final score at Madison Square Garden is a Ranger victory over the Toronto Maple Leafs by a score of 6-2.